Hello and welcome back to the greenhouse. Now I wasn't sure what my next job here would be, whether it's potting on our chili and pepper seedlings or sowing the tomatoes, but actually today it will be the tomatoes. I think the peppers and chilies can maybe wait at least some days, maybe a week, before they need to be potted on. I'll give you a quick look at those seedlings before I talk about the tomatoes. Let's have a look. So these are looking quite nice. Some of these are a good size. Now, the different varieties grow at different rates, of course. They germinate at slightly different rates. These are Padron here, and that's the largest one by quite a bit. If we look over here, these two are the bull's horn peppers. This is the red one, and from here we've got the yellow. And as I mentioned previously, I've always noticed that the yellow germinates a little bit faster than the red, and you can see that from the size of the seedlings here. These have got a little bit of a head start on these, but they're all looking absolutely fine. I think everything's got at least one set of true leaves, and some have the next set coming. So these are well on the way, and it won't be long before they need to be potted on. Something miraculous has happened here. These 3 cells, well, they had at least 6 seeds in. These are the seeds from eBay that I wasn't happy with last time because nothing had shown up. Well, this one came up first, and then alongside it came a second one, which I then moved into this cell. Germination, obviously, not great, about a third there. I'm sure I had at least 2 seeds in each cell, and I would have liked to have seen more of those, but still, there are 2 of them, and if they turn out to be true to type, or as far as I can tell, then I will probably save some seed from this one. But if it's not true to type, I shall not do that, of course. But these are all looking fine, and it won't be long before they need to be moved on. No signs of needing it now, still good green leaves. But if I pop one of these cells up, we can take a look at the roots there and see what they're like. So I need to be careful how I handle this. This compost mix is ever so light, so it has a habit of sort of falling apart. So if I gently push that up and see if I can lift this out, we can have a look at the root system. Well, yeah, I mean, there's a little bit of root there. It's starting to fill out the block. By no means bound up yet. And you do get from these cells very nice root systems developed. So I think there's enough root there showing that one could move this on now. But it'll certainly be happy in there for some days longer and maybe a week or so. So I'm not in a rush to do that. I'll probably do that in a few days' time. Try and get that back in without disturbing it too much. I don't do that very often, of course, but it is handy just to lift it out and take a look. You can also get an idea by having a look along the bottom and seeing how much root is visible, and well, there are roots visible in most of those cells, so I would think in a few days' time that will be perfect to move along. So I'm quite happy with the little pepper and chili seedlings. So it's on to today's job, which is sowing the tomatoes. Now, it's been quite a long time since I've grown tomatoes in containers, which I'll be doing here because there's no soil in this greenhouse. It's got a solid concrete floor. Now, the small fruited peppers and chilies, I've grown those for years in 10-litre pots. So I know roughly what I need to do with those, and they'll grow quite happily. You can pack those in quite tightly, so we can get a lot in this space. Probably can't get so many tomatoes in here. They do take up a fair bit of room. However, I'm going to have to grow those in pots for the first time in quite some time. I really love growing them in soil. If you have the opportunity and you've got some nice fairly light but deep, fertile soil. Get plenty of manure and compost into that, and the tomatoes will love it. And a tomato plant can produce a surprisingly large root system. It's quite amazing. If you lift them with care, you'll find that the roots spread a very long way, and constraining them in what will inevitably be a fairly small container compared to the size of root system they can develop, it's a little bit mean. And when I first moved from containers to growing in beds, the change in the quality of the plants was enormous. The plants are so much more robust, great big thick stems, and up to a point, very healthy plants. Now, of course, after growing in the same soil for some years, you can run into some problem with a build-up of soil-borne pests and diseases. However, if you then graft the plants, you can deal with those fairly easily, and then you get even more robust plants. So I do like growing in beds, but we're going to be in pots here, and there's a limited amount of space for those. So I'm only growing 4 varieties this year, and we'll see how they do. I've just picked 4 that I'm already familiar with. I don't need too many variables in our experiment this year, and we'll see how they go. So 2 small fruited sorts and 2 with somewhat larger fruits. The first one is black cherry. So there are all sorts of mad varieties with crazy colours to them now, and it seems quite popular to be growing funny, colourful tomatoes. Black cherry's been around quite a long time, and it's not one of those mad ones. It's not black either. It's sort of a dusky, reddy brown colour, but it is very tasty. And in common with lots of the so-called black or purple fruits, at least the older varieties don't tend to be quite that colourful, but they do have a very nice, rich flavour. Black cherry's one I grew, well, quite some years ago, but it was very good then. Hopefully it's just as good now. And then an old classic Principe Borghese. In fact, all the remaining 3 are Italian. So this gives fairly small. They're not tiny cherry tomato size. They're a bit bigger than a normal cherry tomato. In fact, black cherry's not that small either. Slightly oval fruits, classic for drying, but slightly thicker skin than you might prefer. But I quite like them. They've got quite a compact growth there with the way the leaves develop. So they're quite handy if you're trying to pack in plenty of plants. Then I've got one of the Costalutos. So that simply means rib. This is Costaluto Fiorentino, and there are very similar sorts of tomato from all over Italy. Almost every town or village has its own particular strain, and they are all pretty similar. So yeah, it's not a bad variety. I've grown that in the past many times. And then I've got Pantano, and this is, in some ways, it's one of my favourite tomatoes. It's not the best at anything, but it's what one might call a good doer. It's a reliable sort, gives sensible sized fruit, plenty of them, and they are very tasty. Lovely sliced in the salad. It's a really very pleasant tomato. Now there are varieties that I prefer to this one. I like Rosa di Sorrento. I like the large Oxheart tomato from Belmonte, not the Costaluto. That's not the same thing at all. There are 2 that have the name Belmonte, but the large Oxheart one is an absolutely magnificent beast. Finding the seed is a little bit more tricky, whereas these 4 are readily available, at least here in the UK. So I haven't had to hunt around in some of the more exotic locations for the seeds this time. I've just got 4 sort of off-the-shelf varieties. But they should do nicely, and we'll see how they go this year and see how many we can fit in. And obviously it's a bit of an experiment because I'm in my neighbour's greenhouse and we're sort of working on this together here. And this was only put up sort of part way through the season last year, so it had some plants in it, but not a full season. So this will be the first time we're trying to really cram this space with plants, and we want to get a grip on how many we can fit in and what a sensible pot size would be. So lots of variables to deal with. Don't need to be experimenting with new varieties or anything else. So I've got 4 varieties that I know are pretty reliable and they all give tasty fruit. So that's what we're sowing today. I'm going to be sowing in the same seed trays that I've used for the peppers and chilies. So good size cells, and these are one of those nice rigid trays, and they last for many years, not one of these horrible flimsy trays that starts to fall apart after one season, or where it breaks up when you try to get the plants out. And I really like the shape of the cells. They help produce some really nice root systems, as I mentioned when talking about the chili plants there. But just the usual job now, just going to sow these seeds. I've got 4 varieties, so I'll do, well, 4 columns on this tray, 1 of each, I think, and that'll give me more plants than I need here. But that's what I always do. I always sow more seed than I need, more cells than I need, transplant more plants than I need, and at each stage I can be a little bit picky about which ones get moved on to grow further. But anyway, I'll stop waffling now and get on with a bit of work. So I've got my usual sowing mix ingredients here. I've got some sieved sort of multi-purpose compost. It's a rather coarse sieve I've been using here, and it's allowed various woody bits to pass through, but I don't actually mind that. It's not that big a deal. Sometimes these can be annoying if you're trying to prick out lots of small seedlings, but it's not actually. This stuff is actually quite nice. I quite like it, and I don't mind these woody bits in it really. I've sieved out the larger lumps, but what's left is not too bad. Then I've got some rehydrated coir. This was rehydrated some weeks ago. You can see that it still holds its moisture very well. If I give that a squeeze, yeah, there is still moisture in that. And then I've got some vermiculite, so I'll just give that a little mix up, slightly random proportions. It's probably roughly equal amounts of the compost and the coir, perhaps a little more compost than coir, and then a couple of handfuls of the vermiculite. No 2 batches are quite the same, but it's not that big a deal. What you get from this is a really nice light compost, and I do quite like that. I don't like a compost that is heavy and is likely to get too soggy. You've got to be careful with coir because it can hold so much moisture. And of course you've got the vermiculite in there. That can hold moisture, but it also helps with the drainage. So you end up with I think, quite a nice mix of properties. It's quite an airy mix. It's good for root development. The only thing is that it's quite fragile. So when you come to take the plants out, you have to be ever so careful. When you're potting on, the whole lot can sort of fall apart. But it seems to work quite well for me. Right, anyway, that's mixed well enough. I'll just give this a quick fill. Right, now what I want to do is give that a good water. There is moisture in here, of course, but I want to give this a good soak to start with. Now the mixture will drop, well, it's not dropping much, but it can do when you water it. It'll slump slightly. That's not too bad. Right, I don't think I need to top that up. So, I'm just going to make a little dimple in each cell. With the chili and the pepper seeds, I give them a soak before I sow them. But that's because they've got quite a hard seed casing. I don't do that with the tomatoes. So they can be sown straight in there. I will drop a couple of seeds in each one of those depressions, and that should be fine. We definitely don't have enough room here for all of those plants, so I'm going to have plenty with just this one tray. A couple of seeds in each will be fine. I expect to get pretty good germination on these, so I will have to thin out if it becomes necessary. I can always move them about a little bit. I don't do too much of that, but I don't like empty cells either, so it's most likely there won't be any empty cells, but if there are, I'll move them about before I thin out. Right, and then the Costaluto. Now the Pantano's always been a very reliable one for me. The Costalutos, they've been a bit variable in my experience. Sometimes they grow great, get good sized fruit of them and very tasty, and sometimes they can be a little bit mean, but we'll see how these do. Now the peppers and chilies, they can take a few weeks to come up. Normally expect to see something, certainly within 2 weeks, but some of them can take longer than that. But the tomatoes, they are rather quicker. So I wouldn't be surprised if we see some within 7 to 10 days. Most of those should be up, and then they grow away quite quickly. Now, when you sow these, depends very much on how you're able to hold the plants. So obviously you've got to keep them not just frost free, but in reasonable growing conditions until it is time to plant them out. Have I got enough seed here? Yeah, I've got plenty. So you have to be a little bit careful. If you start them too early, the plants will be far too big for you to sort of keep them protected. We're fortunate, we've got plenty of heated propagator space, so I can set up another propagator to keep the plants in as they get bigger, and that will keep nighttime temperatures reasonable. Daytime temperatures probably won't be much of a problem moving forward, but it's those night temperatures that can get rather too cold for them. So if you're not quite so fortunate to have lots of propagator space or other places where you can look after them, then it's a good idea just to hold off on sowing them maybe another week or two, so that the plants are smaller. Rather too many there. That'll do. Right, I don't need to do anything else except just top that off. There's enough moisture in this compost, I don't need to give that any extra water. If this was a little drier, I might just give that one more drop, but it's not necessary now. So I'm not really pressing that down tight. I'm just making sure there's contact between the soil and the seeds. And that is done. So I'll leave those in the propagator. The propagator's a little bit low now for ideal germination, but it's not going to be a problem. The tomatoes will germinate quite happily in there. During the day, especially when the sun comes out, it's not a lot of sun today, it's a bit moody, but when the sun comes out, it's pretty warm in here, especially in the propagator, so I don't think it'll be a problem. So I'm not going to touch the temperature, I'm just going to leave those in there, and hopefully in a week to 10 days, we'll start to see the first seedlings emerge, and with a bit of luck, we will have a full tray of tomato plants. Anyway, that is all for this video. Thanks ever so much for watching, and bye for now.